Welcome to Please Excuse My OCD. My name is Tyler, and today I have my friend Helen, who has the Instagram page FearToFabulous. And we came across each other on Instagram and have chit-chatted a few times back and forth. And I'm so excited to have her on the podcast today because she has an absolute incredible story about her OCD and her ERP experience that I think people would really, really benefit from hearing. So really excited to have Helen here. Thank you so much, Helen. By the way, want to just put this out there that we are not mental health professionals. We are just two people who have lived experience with OCD, and we are here to chat about it. As always, if you are struggling with OCD or anything in that realm, please contact a mental health professional. Helen, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks so much for being here. I would love to know a little bit more about you and your story with OCD and ERP for the listeners who have yet to discover your page.
Yeah, sure. So, I'm Helen. I'm from England. I live in the north of England. And I actually was diagnosed with OCD quite late compared to some people. I was 21, 22 when the first sort of symptoms started, or at least started to be an issue in terms of debilitating me to a point that I sought help. Looking back now in hindsight, I do believe it's something that I have had and did have in childhood, but it was nowhere near as severe then. Whereas in early adulthood, it became a real issue. So it actually initially started off, I went on holiday and I went to Spain and I was absolutely fine. We landed in Spain. I got into bed that night and I had the first panic attack I've ever had in my life. And didn't know what on earth was going on. Felt like I was dying, just absolutely horrendous. And I was like, wow, just what's happening to me? I was terrified. Sure. And obviously I was in a foreign country, which really doesn't help. Mm-hmm. So then essentially I think because I panicked from the panic, I just kept having more and more panic attacks, and they just went on for like 2 days straight. Essentially, the minute one would stop, the next one would start. So eventually, I was with my ex-partner then. He actually called out a doctor because he was like, I don't know what to do. Sure. This doctor came out, he was Spanish, so there was obviously a serious language barrier. But basically what he said was, there isn't really anything I can do for you. All I can suggest is that you go home. And I was like, I cannot get on a flight like this. Yeah. I was like, it was horrendous. So he gave me 2 diazepam and he said, take those at the airport and just get yourself home. So that's what I did. When I landed back in the UK, obviously made an appointment with my doctor straight away. They obviously confirmed that it was panic attacks. And they put me on beta blockers. Do you know what they are? Because medication's called different things in the US, isn't it? So I'm always a bit... So he put me on those. And it just progressed from there, really. From there on in, it was just panic attacks every day. Just constant. Until eventually the GP referred me for, like, talking therapy. Mm-hmm. So I was having very sort of surface level anxiety management therapy. And then they put me on antidepressants, so I went on fluoxetine at that point. Yep. And then within weeks of being on that, the anxiety management therapist said to me, listen, I don't want you to worry, but I'm going to refer you to somebody else because this is not a panic disorder. There's something else going on. And I was like, okay. Wow. So she then referred me to a psychiatric nurse who then diagnosed me with OCD.
Oh, wow.
And I think I was about 22 at that point, and I'm 40 now. So wow. It's a long time ago, but yeah, so I was then diagnosed with OCD. So the first sort of theme, essentially for me, was like a health OCD, really, because it was all the panic sensations. It was the fear that my heart was going to stop, I was going to die. all of those sort of things. But then over the years, the themes have manifested. I've sort of overcome one thing and it's become something else, and it has
Hmm.
bounced from theme to theme to theme. And it's never really stopped. So it went from the health anxiety to the I'm going crazy.
Yep.
I
Know all
had
about it.
years of that. And it
Ugh.
was like, I was terrified. I was like, the typical sort of hiding everything that I could hurt anybody with. So
Yep.
wouldn't touch a knife,
Hmm.
all that sort of stuff. Wouldn't learn to drive, still have never learned to drive because I'm terrified that if I was behind the wheel of a car, I could hurt somebody,
Hmm.
that sort of stuff. And then we sort of overcome that. And then I got contamination OCD.
It's
And
yeah.
yeah, the contamination OCD was probably the worst
Yep.
because that got so severe. Even though I was on medication and I was having therapy and everything, it just got so severe that I stopped eating altogether. Um, and then I ended up in hospital with malnutrition.
Oh,
Um,
jeez.
it was extremely severe. But then when it got to that point that I was literally like starving to death, I
Hmm.
actually got some proper help. So
Wow.
yeah, because before that, all the help had been like here in the UK, they give you so many sessions, and then once those sessions end, whether you're better or not, like you
That's
kind of
it.
just yeah.
Oh
So
my
obviously, with
gosh.
something like OCD, that's just leaving it to manifest further.
Of course.
But then when that happened and I wasn't eating because the contamination OCD got so bad, they actually I got ERP then, and that
Hmm.
was the first time that I had ERP, and it
Wow.
was amazing. They got me back eating. I hadn't been able to use my own kitchen for
Hmm.
years, literally years. I think it was probably 5 years or something like that. I couldn't put anything in the fridge. I couldn't use any plates, cups, cutlery. I couldn't even put something down on a kitchen service. I couldn't bring food into the house. It had got that severe.
Wow.
Um, and they managed to help me to overcome all of that and got me back to being able to eat in the house, put food in the cupboards, use all of the appliances. It was like, wow, this is incredible. So
Wow.
that got dealt with. But then I obviously had other subtypes of OCD going on that had never been addressed because the contamination OCD was obviously so severe that it was causing the most problems.
Hmm.
So they sort of just dealt with that in the sessions that they had, and then I was left to manage it myself, which I stayed on top of the contamination OCD, but other themes came in. And once
Sure.
again, over the next few years, slowly but surely, they then became debilitating. And so
Yeah.
this year, I found myself back in ERP again with a
Oh
whole
my
other set of
gosh.
problems to deal with.
Wow. I mean, Helen, that is a story. That is a
Mm-hmm.
very heavy story. And I'm just like, because I know how hard I have contamination OCD. I've had it for most of my life, and health. Like I totally understand the different manifestations of these subtypes of OCD and how it really just weaves its way in and out of things that it could just, pop up one day because something you had a thought or something.
Yeah,
So I know how wild that is, and really how debilitating it can be. But to be at that point where you're in the hospital for malnutrition, and to now be at a place where like you are essentially, able to function from a
mm-hmm.
contamination point of view, like is like I'm wondering, I know we can get into this, but like I'm wondering like what was it that gave you the strength when you were at that lowest point to then be able to take that first step in ERP, because ERP is very like scary to a lot of people to think about, like, oh, I have to like face what I'm like most scared about. How did you find the strength to take that first step when you were in the hospital at that point?
So my parents actually came to visit me, and
Mm-hmm.
I'd sort of, because I knew that obviously I'd lost an incredible amount of weight
Mm-hmm.
at that point, and I really was unwell. Um, my parents came to the hospital to see me, and
Mm-hmm.
I will never ever forget the look on my dad's face.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
And he said to me, I don't care what you think is going to happen to you if you eat food. It can't be worse than this. It can't be
Yes.
worse than this.
Mm-hmm.
And it just sort of like got through to me somehow. And he just said to me, like, from now on, whatever your brain's saying to you is going to happen to you, think about this.
Mm-hmm.
This is the alternative. If you eat the food, you might panic. You might think that something bad's going to happen. You might believe that it's going to harm you in some way, but you're harming yourself by not eating it.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
it was that really that got through to me, and also the fact that I knew that there was only one way that was going to end if I didn't turn it around.
Yeah,
You
of
can't
course.
not eat.
Sure.
And so I think it was sort of like my back was up against the wall, in the sense of I didn't have a choice at that point. I had
Mm-hmm.
to deal with it. And then obviously when I got an ERP therapist, she was just absolutely incredible. She was incredible. And we did it in such tiny baby steps of,
Mm-hmm.
let's try this, let's try that, the exposures were so graded and they started so small that they were manageable enough to just take that risk.
Wow.
And I think that is really the key, especially with something like contamination OCD, where that is incredibly hard. Like I said, I've had several subtypes of OCD. For me, that was the most severe.
Of course.
And I think just having somebody that can sort of attack the exposures in the right way and grade them in a way that makes it like, okay, we're going to take a risk, but we're not going to jump to you're going to eat something off the floor straight away. We're
Right.
going to take a managed risk. And also I think the way she set up the exposures was that each time she was sort of wagering it that we would have a positive outcome, which would give me the
Mm-hmm.
courage to go into the next one.
Interesting. So, and this is very so from the outs, from my perspective, I did very minimal ERP on my own, and I do not recommend that. So it
No.
wasn't until that I was able to work with someone who knows OCD where I was able to tackle a lot of this. But when you talk about small, manageable goals, I think that because that's the same way that habits work too, right? When
Mm-hmm.
we,
Yeah.
our habits, it's not deciding to change your whole schedule and do a million things on Monday. It's
Mm-hmm.
small increments of step by step, processes. And so for you, when you talk about having contamination OCD, because it's so, it's such a, it, I mean, any OCD theme for people who have OCD is worse to them, but contamination
Yes.
OCD, because like you literally can't avoid germs or like it's physically impossible to just exist in the air, and even then there's germs, right?
It will always
um
find something, won't it? That's the thing. You can
right,
live in the most. You can give up eating. You can give up going to the toilet, but you still got to
right,
breathe. So it's gonna
right,
get you somehow.
exactly. And so for you being in that position, and your your therapy, your ERP specialist is telling you like, let's do one step here and try this here, do you remember like your first session of ERP? Do you remember how hard that was for you, or even like the first time that you did the exercise and got through it? Do you remember what that was like?
Yeah. So what she did was she got me to buy what we would call a pot noodle here in the UK. It's like a tub with noodles in, dehydrated, and you pour boiling water onto it. I don't
Yeah,
know what you would
sure.
call it there.
Yeah, just
She
dry
got me to,
dry noodles.
yeah, so she got me to buy that and bring it into the house. And obviously I hadn't even used the kettle for years because I couldn't. But she was like, right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to make those, and you're going to eat them. And I was like, no, I'm really scared. I can't do this. But we did it, and at that point, honestly, like looking back now, it sounds so insanely ridiculous, but I couldn't even put it down onto the worktop to pour the water. I had to hold it because I couldn't let it touch a surface in the house.
Gotcha.
And then when she said, we're going to take it through to the lounge and you're going to eat it in there. And I wouldn't put it down on the table in the lounge because it couldn't touch the table because then I wouldn't eat it.
Right.
And so I kept hold of it, and she was like, come on, even if you just have one mouthful of that, I'll be happy. I just want you to have some of it. And once I'd had one mouthful of it, I was like, I can do this. I'm going to eat all of it. Because I really wanted to get better. And she had completely made me understand that essentially the only way out of it was going to be through it. And the only way to get rid of that fear was going to be to experience it. And so once I understood that intellectually, I was like, I'm going to have to then. I'm going to have to do it. And I remember being really scared. And then what became a compulsion for me from that, which is really interesting, is that I would eat it. And then I would look at the clock and I would be like, right, if I'm still okay in an hour, I've survived and I'm okay. Nothing bad's happened and I'm okay. So that became a thing then where I would eat it and then I would be like pacing around the house and panicking and timing it and checking, has anything bad happened to me? Do I feel funny? Is it like, so that became, so then obviously we had to undo all of that as well as time went by. But it is actually insane to think that like I was in that place with contamination OCD. Wow. And now I would literally eat anything from anywhere. I would literally, honestly, you could rub it on the bottom of your shoe and I would be like, okay.
That is so, like, that is such a great success story though. And like, that gives a lot of hope. I mean, even for me, like I understand how scary it is. And because I have plenty of phobias and I have, contamination OCD is very prevalent in my life. And to see how, or even just hear how hard it was for you, the point that you were at, to now saying that statement of like, yeah, I could literally eat anything. Like that is such a huge success story, and also like something that's very a testament, right, to ERP itself.
Oh yeah.
And
I think the thing is, I mean, obviously you have to do it graded, you have to do it gradually, but also like never stop. That's the other thing that I learned is like even now, up to say a year ago, so it was like 6 or 7 years where I continuously pushed that boundary further and further and further. It didn't happen overnight. It was very much a slow process. It took me a long time to be able to like touch vegetables with my bare hands and chop them up and put them. It was very much like I couldn't actually touch the food at first. It had to be something that was already like in a container and I could put a fork in. And so it took a long time for me to get past the whole touching things with my hands and stuff. But like now it just doesn't bother me. I couldn't tell you the last time I washed my hands and I don't care either. I'm just like, okay.
Wow. So from that point of bridging the gap between where you were and where you are now, do you think the process, when you talk about having to you had these little steps and then you did them and then you would succeed at them, and at what point did you notice a change in your life? How long were you doing ERP at this point where you noticed like, wow, like I've come a pretty long way?
I'd say probably, I'd say the first couple of weeks were like really, really tough. And after that, it was like, do you know when you watch the strongman competitions? I always refer to ERP like this because I've just been through it again for something else. And they start pushing a boulder at first and it's like, and it takes them everything to push it. And then all of a sudden it gets some momentum and it just starts rolling and it's like it's no problem. that's how I find ERP. I feel like at the beginning, it's like incredibly difficult. But all of a sudden, that momentum starts, and it's just like you just boss it then because you've got that
Wow.
little bit of evidence in your head that's like, I can do this, and I've
Yeah.
done this, and this, and I survived all of it. And it gives you that confidence then to be
Hmm.
like, I can do this. And it did just seem to just spiral. And I think the more that I sort of did the exposures and disproved the thoughts, the more I started seeing the thoughts for what they were as well,
Hmm.
which was lies. So
Yes.
then when the thoughts came in, I took less notice of them, and I was a lot more like, I'm not believing you.
Hmm.
Don't talk to me like that. I'm not having this anymore. So I started sort of defying it. And I think that's, if somebody said to me, what's the shift in ERP, I would say you go from being on the defensive. I feel like when we're stuck in compulsions and we're like sort of really debilitated by OCD, we're on the defensive and we're trying to avoid and push everything away and protect.
Yes.
And when you go into ERP, you go onto the offensive, and it's
Gotcha.
OCD that is being attacked, and you are the attacker, and you're going at it, and it's retreating as you go. And that's the way I view it. I view it like a war where
I love that.
it switches, and it's like I'm no longer on the defense now. I'm on the offense, and I'm
Wow.
coming at you, OCD. And when you do, it's very surprising how fast it loses its power.
Yeah. Because now and people say like you can't fight OCD with logic, right?
No.
You have to teach your brain and really rewire your brain
Yeah.
by exposing yourself, and it's the uncertainty of being okay with the uncertainty,
Yeah.
which is like the way to be on the offense, right? With
Yes.
OCD. So, and I know that you mentioned your you just got through ERP again, correct?
Yes.
So that's incredible. Like I'm just in awe of you because I know how hard it is. I know how hard
Yeah.
this is to deal with, and how present it is for people who have OCD every day in most situations.
Yeah.
And for you coming back and going into ERP again and already having, like a fundamental basis of what it was like for you prior,
Mhm.
did you feel, starting ERP over again, did you feel that you had an advantage because you had done that prior, or did you still feel like almost helpless in a way?
I felt very helpless,
Did
very
you?
helpless, because I felt like, I think this sort of episode of OCD that I've just had treatment for, I've probably been building for like 5 years, and
Wow.
I probably should have reached out for help 5 years ago and didn't, because it was like,
Wow.
well, I've had ERP, I know what to do, and I mean, I wasn't doing it, but
Yeah.
I was
Of
kind of
course.
like, yeah, I was kind of in my head thinking I should be able to manage this. And so then I was too scared to reach out for help. And I was like, what if they won't help me? What if I'm beyond
Hmm.
help? What if? So it was like typical OCD planting
Yeah.
that doubt of. So it took me far too long to reach out for help. And unfortunately, in that time, the compulsions became ridiculously debilitating, very, very severe.
Wow.
Um, and when I eventually did reach out for help, yes, then I feel like the fact that I've been through ERP before was a massive advantage. A massive advantage, because it all came back. And I remembered that, like, okay, yeah, this is really hard at first. It's going to get easier. It's going to get better. Stick with it. It's going to
Wow.
be okay.
Wow. And so you did now this last round of ERP. How long were you in that for?
So it was about 6 months.
Hmm. Wow.
Um, I think it was 20 sessions or 19. It was supposed to be 20, but he let me go after 19, because
Wow.
obviously I just
Okay.
I just bossed it. No,
Yeah.
I think it was just a case of what he said to me. He was like, I don't want this to become something that you rely on too much. You know what you're
Gotcha.
doing, you can do it, and obviously we have to be careful that this doesn't become a safety blanket. So that's why we ended when we ended. The other session, if we'd have took it, would have been just,
Yeah.
it wasn't necessary.
Wow.
But it was the thing that I find with OCD, and I remember saying this to the therapist that I've just had ERP with, is that even though we know this disorder, and I've had this disorder for 18 years, and I know, like, obviously listening to my story, it sounds like, oh wow, she was really bad and she got better. No, 18 years of
Yeah.
up and down, backwards and forwards. It's been a journey. And I remember saying to him, the thing is, like, every time it comes back with something different, even though I understand it and I understand sort of, I understand it intellectually,
Hmm.
actually knowing how to help myself when it comes back with a different theme is really hard. Because obviously, you're trying to resolve issues with your thinking with your own thoughts,
Right.
which are biased,
Yep.
and they are always going to lean towards what OCD thinks.
Right. Yeah.
So that is where the struggle was for me. And that's why, even though I'm saying, like, I knew what I needed to do, I still wasn't doing it.
The brain is built to survive, and the brain's survival mechanism is exactly what stops us from doing the uncomfortable, right?
Exactly.
So we're not really even wired to even recognize, oh, I should do, or like I should be, exposing myself, or I shouldn't be doing this compulsion. We're not even wired to like immediately react like that.
No. Because our brain says to us, this is a threat.
Right.
And we trust it and we believe
Yeah.
it and we go, okay, well, I won't do that then. I'm really scared now, so let's
Yep.
back away. Because we just, and that's one of the hardest parts of VRP, definitely, is learning to go against that,
Mhm.
because it's your instincts and it's your gut, isn't it? It's that gut feeling of, like, nope, something bad's going to happen, and having to be
Yes.
able to go, I don't care.
Right.
It's so hard, like,
Right.
so
Because you don't
hard
feel
to do
that. You
that.
don't feel that you don't care. You
No.
genuinely are terrified of shit. Like you are
Yeah.
so scared, and you still have to do what you're scared of anyway, right?
Yeah.
Which is, it goes against our nature.
It takes massive amounts of courage and of faith. And I think that's why, when you said before that, you tried ERP on your own and you
Yeah.
very quickly realised that it wasn't going to work and it wasn't a good idea,
Right.
I think that is a massive part of it, because if you have a therapist, you can kind of put your trust into them and you can be led by them, and you can, even though you can't really trust to go against your own gut, you can be like, okay, but I do have distorted thinking, and this
Mhm.
person's qualified and this person understands it from an outside perspective, and they're telling me that it's okay to do this, so I'm going to be led by them. That's how I found it easier to do it.
Yeah. I can totally I can totally see the thought process behind that, because
Mm-hmm.
we have a really odd way as humans of, we would much rather put our trust in other people than ourselves
Yeah.
sometimes,
Which
and
ultimately we do have to learn to put it in ourselves for
right.
recovery. But I think to start off with ERP, if that's what you've got to do, then
Mhm.
as long as it
Do it.
gets the ball rolling, I think
Yeah.
so.
And so I'm curious, you had mentioned you went to Spain, right? It was your when you first had a panic attack. Um it sounds like panic disorder was your first step into
Mm-hmm.
the beginning of all of this, right? And then OCD really is like the pinnacle of anxiety, right? It's
Yeah,
like past panic. It's like, how can I find a sense of control? Because I've had panic disorder too. And usually with panic disorder and OCD, they kind of go hand in hand. Um, because we can't control, when the panic attack comes, and because it's so scary, our brains are like, okay, we need to figure out ways to manage, quote unquote, life. And so um, when you think back to this time in your life, and you were having, and especially not being home and having like your first panic attack, and having to get on it, like I don't like flying. I
No,
really
me either.
dislike it. So I can imagine just how, like, for the first time in your life having that experience, how scary that was for you. Do you remember being like, do you know what it was that maybe triggered the panic attack, or was it just, were you like, was it a stressful time in your life, or was it just kind of just, it just came out of nowhere?
It came absolutely out of nowhere, Tyler. Literally,
Wow.
I was so happy, so excited. I've just got on holiday, and it's like, yay, I'm on holiday. And then I got into bed, and I was like, I can't breathe. That I remember that being the very first thing, is just being like, like
Yeah.
somebody had just took all of the air out of my lungs, and being like, I can't breathe. I can't what, and it was like, but it came from nowhere. To this day, I cannot think what triggered it, what started it. I have no idea. No idea.
That is fascinating to me because, um, when you think about panic attacks, or, people usually have in their brains like an idea of like what it is and how it happens. But the whole like explanation behind panic disorder is the fact that it is random, and that it
Mm-hmm.
can happen. And so soon people start to become agoraphobic because they're afraid, well, what if I have a panic attack there, and I can't control it, or what if I pass out, or if I vomit. And it's, you start to go down this rabbit hole. And you said this happened when you were 22, and this is
Mm-hmm.
this is like, that is a very, when you're in your 20s, or like your early 20s, it's like, oh, it's like the best time of your life, and you're trying to do like all this stuff. Did you feel that, once that kind of, panic disorder kind of broke out for you, and you're in at this point in your life in your early 20s, did you kind of see a decline throughout your
Oh,
20s, or was it, yeah?
Tyler, I feel like I've lost the last 18 years of my life. Like,
Wow.
genuinely. It's so
Wow.
upsetting to think about. But yes, absolutely. I feel like I've missed out on so much. And like, since I flew home from Spain that day, I have never got on an aircraft since.
Really?
Never. No. And
Wow.
I can't. Like you've just said about developing agoraphobia, I have that. I've just been
Hmm.
through ERP again. He reassessed me. The
Yep.
OCD score has come right down, and I'm great. Agoraphobia score is still up here. It's
Wow.
just, yeah, it
S-
it really is.
just your story is one of hope, but also it's so interesting to me because when it comes to, you know OCD, like you said, there are a lot of things that about it, and there's a lot of ways of coping that you intellectually know, but there's always another kind of theme lurking around the corner that takes you
Yeah,
by surprise, right?
yeah,
For agoraphobia, you know, is do you treat that, because I know, do you know, I think we have a mutual friend, Sean, who
yes.
runs, yeah. So I talked to him, and he's such an incredible guy, and what he's doing on Instagram, with his page ERP and me, like, is just incredible. And
He's unbelievable.
yeah, I love what he's doing, and how he's, really showcasing what it's like to go through this. Do you treat your agoraphobia the same way, with ERP like that, or is it like a different process for you?
Yeah, so to be honest, if I'm going to hold my hands up and be completely honest, I
Yeah,
haven't done a lot to push the agoraphobia,
sure.
because the when I went back to the ERP therapist this time, he said to me, we will treat the OCD. That is all we have time to treat. If you feel like you need to come back for help for that, you can come back in 3 to 6 months and start again on that. But what he said to me in the last session was, Helen, it's essentially the same thing. What you need to do, it's graded exposure. It's this, that, and the other. He was like, I have every faith in you that you can do this. But if you can't, please come back. Do not leave it another 5 years. And I was like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, I mean, that is the biggest lesson that I will take away from all of this. And what I would say to anybody listening now, I am not somebody that goes around giving advice, but what I would say is, just get the help. Just get
Yeah.
the help.
Yeah.
Like, seriously, as somebody that can sit here and say, I have lost out on so much over the last 18 years, get the help.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work, go back, get the help again, get the help
Hmm.
again, and get the help again. Because eventually you'll get there.
That's incredible. And too,
Yeah.
like the whole, because I when you were saying that you had a nurse that you said basically was like, hey, here's your diagnosis of OCD.
Mm-hmm.
How many people go so long with being misdiagnosed?
Oh, yeah.
Like bipolar, like you can get misdiagnosed with bipolar, and I have OCD and ADHD, and sometimes together they can mimic bipolar
Yes.
disorder. Um, how many people go try to get help and then they are met with, like, I mean, even just the 3 month, or like the 20 sessions kind of rule, like that is wild to me, because it's mental health is not something that you can just like, oh, like we'll be good in 20 sessions. Like, I'm sure there's like a method to it, but like everybody's different, right?
Of
So
course.
um for people who have been met with so many roadblocks, whether it's the healthcare system or just being misdiagnosed, and they're just now starting to dive into their OCD, it sounds like your story is like a beacon of hope for them,
Mm-hmm.
because I mean, you just said it, you went 18 years really of trying to like get a handle on this, and you're just now starting to get your life back at, you just said 40, right?
Mm-hmm.
40 years old.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. And so
But I've done
when
it. And this time I've really done it. Like,
yeah,
it won't get me again. It
that is
really won't.
incredible.
I am very, very sort of determined, and I just feel like finally I get it. I get it. And I won't stop doing exposures now. And every time anything crops up now that starts to become an issue, I will treat it how I've been taught to treat it through ERP now. So I'm hoping that that will be the difference that won't lead me down that road again. Um,
Absolutely.
it means that I'm going to have to live a life of courage and of never ever sort of taking my eye off the ball, because it's
Hmm.
very sneaky how it comes in. But I feel like I have turned a corner now. I feel pretty confident in that. But going back to the agoraphobia, what you were saying about that and about people being misdiagnosed and things like that, I have clearly had that since I started with panic disorder 18 years ago. I was diagnosed with agoraphobia this year.
Wow. All those
Yes.
years later, and now just, I mean, and through, like you said, you have not been on a plane since
No.
18 years ago.
I won't get on a train on my own. I won't get on a bus on my own. I
Wow.
don't like being in cars. I went to a funeral today, and you know how once the service starts, they shut the doors
Yep. Tough.
straight away.
Yeah.
Panic. I
Yep.
can't get out. I can't get out. Oh my God, I can't get out. I'm going to make a
Oh,
scene because I'm stuck in here. And what if I need to get out and there's a row of people here and I'd have to climb over them all, and then I'm going to make a scene. And oh, yeah,
I
that's
know
how
that
I've been
feeling.
for 18 years. Nobody has ever gone, that's agoraphobia.
And now that you're aware of, you're aware of it, and you know what it is, and you still showed up, and like you went, like you said, you went to the funeral today. I know how hard it is when you kind of have to like force yourself to like leave the house and do things. And a lot of it, I'm aside from agoraphobia, like I'm personally am just like a homebody. I just love to be on the couch in my sweats. Like that's my hobby.
Yeah.
Um, do you find that I with COVID, when COVID happened, did you find that made anything worse when it came to your
Yeah.
agoraphobia?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because going to places like supermarkets has always been a massive issue for me.
Yep.
And that's something that I'm still doing exposures on now. I can do it now. But the anxiety is still sort of, I'd say, at like 50%. It's not come down enough for me to think like I'm okay with this. It's
Yes.
still uncomfortable. I still really don't like it very much, but I do it, and I'm doing it like 4 times a week at the moment. I'm just pushing it,
Wow.
and eventually the fear will subside, like it has with everything else, if I continue to do the exposures. But it definitely, COVID come along, and obviously I think it was the same whichever country you were in, where it was like we all started online shopping rather than actually going to the supermarket in person because it was safer. Obviously, like there was months at a time where you couldn't go to work, and then it was like, right, you've got to go back, and the panic I had going back was horrendous. And plus, as somebody that had contamination OCD, although I'd recovered from it, I don't think you ever fully recover from any of these themes. I think they're always there. You're managing them, but they're still there. That's the way I look at it. You learn to get a handle on it, and you can deal with it in a way that it doesn't impact your life,
Right.
but it's still there. And for me,
sorry, go ahead.
COVID come along, and that contamination theme that a few years earlier had managed to beat to the ground was back. But the really positive story here is it really did not become a problem because I managed it. Yeah, I really did manage it. And actually, my parents were like, wow, because I was always the germaphobe kind of like, really, obviously, I'd had very severe OCD. I'd been hospitalised. And then when COVID hit and it was like older people were more vulnerable to it and things like that, I was like saying to my parents, do not go to the supermarket, do not go in a shop, I will go for you.
Wow.
This is somebody that's recovered from contamination OCD. Yeah. And they were like, wow. And I honestly did that. And for my husband's parents as well. And I would just take the same precautions as everybody else, put a mask on, didn't turn into like extreme hand washing, it was unbelievable. So recovery, like I said, I'm not sure that you ever fully sort of get rid of that thing, but you can certainly learn to manage it in a way that it doesn't affect you.
That's incredible. And you know, you had mentioned, you know, your parents, when your dad, you know, looked at you in the hospital and was like, what's the alternative, basically? Mm-hmm. And you know, you just mentioned your husband too. When people are, you know, people who are listening to this and like learning about your story for the first time, a lot of people with OCD feel, I know that I do, and I feel like we can't have, or like we won't be able to have like meaningful, real, good relationships. And I'm wondering from your perspective, like, to have a partner in your life and having gone through, you know, all of these things and have it be as hard as it is, if you're willing to talk about this.
Yeah, of course.
Like what like from your perspective, what would you say to those people who feel like they'll never have like a relationship because of the way they think, or because of like how they you know, struggle with everyday life? What would you say to those people? That
they will. I met my husband 16 years ago, so I already had OCD when I met him. I had panic attacks all the time. I was extremely unwell with my mental health, and have been ever since, really. In all honesty, I've had good spells and bad spells, but for the most part, it's been a big issue. And there are people out there that will love you in spite of. Absolutely.
I love that.
I was very open with him when we met and explained that I had OCD. And I remember actually the day that we were supposed to go on our first date, my anxiety went absolutely through the roof and I was panicking. And I texted him and I said to him, I don't really feel like I can go. I'm freaking out. And he was like, okay. And I was like, do you want to just come to my house instead? And he was like, fine. And he just came to my house. And yeah, I couldn't get rid of him, Tyler.
That's so funny. That's incredible. I couldn't even
put him off.
He's like, sure, like, you know, whatever, that's fine.
Yeah, and then because he was so cool and so like accepting of it, I felt completely fine with him then. So then we did go off on the date and we did like you know, but I mean, it's been a struggle. And obviously, I think the thing that you have to always keep in mind as the person that has these disorders is that even I struggle to understand it sometimes, and I'm the one that's
Yeah,
got it. So,
sure.
sometimes somebody that you're with may not necessarily fully understand. And also, it's very difficult to watch somebody that you love suffer.
Of course.
And for them, it can be torture to watch us suffer.
Yeah,
And they can also become kind of involved in our avoidance slash compulsions slash everything else,
of course.
which makes things even worse. So I remember the first time I had ERP, the therapist said to my husband, because he used to go into the shops and stuff because I wouldn't go, and he used to I wouldn't touch certain things because I had contamination OCD. He used to touch them for me, and she was like, "You can't do that. You have to stop." And it was really hard for him because he didn't want to make me suffer when
Of
he could
course.
just do it and it didn't bother him.
Right.
But he realised that for the greater good to get me better, he had to stop enabling, and he did.
Yeah.
But I think, look at yourself as a person. That's what I would say to somebody that thinks that. I would say, look at yourself as a person. If you met somebody and they had a disability of some sort, would you judge them for that? Could you not love them for that? I'm
Right.
pretty sure you could. And so why is anybody else any different?
I love that.
And, that's the way I view it anyway.
That's so true.
And yeah, I,
There's
I
really
mean,
no
Sean is
difference.
another great example of that as well. He's,
Hmm.
got a partner, hasn't he? And he's got a
Yeah.
family, and it's absolutely doable. And I think it's just finding the right person, and
Yep.
also very much that opposites attract, I think.
Yeah. If you have
And
two very
whereas,
anxious people, it might not be.
like, my husband is so laid back, you could push him over.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I am very, 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 very anxious,
Yeah.
but it works. It just
Yeah.
totally works because he doesn't panic enough sometimes about stuff,
Hmm.
and he doesn't worry enough. And I'm like, no, come on, you've got it. But at the same time, when I'm getting myself really worked up and into a mess about things, and I'm like, what if, what if, what if, he's like, calm down. Just
Yeah.
calm down, it's fine. So I
That
think that's another
balance.
thing. Yeah, yin yang sort of thing,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah. That's so true. I think that a lot of people could gain something from that insight because it is, you're right. I mean, when somebody says, "Hey, I have diabetes," or "I have, ADHD," or whatever it is that is a very prevalent thing in their life, because OCD is so misunderstood and is still at the forefront of, getting to be understood by us. Um, People fear what they don't understand, and like you said, sometimes we don't even understand it ourselves, and we have it. We deal with it every day,
Yeah.
right? So, um to have somebody that accepts you for, hey, this is how they are, and also understands and can do the work with you, like you said, like instead of having your husband be the one to touch certain things, you're the one that has to do it. And that's very hard to see your loved one like have a panic attack, or to be
Yeah.
like, hey, I'm not going to like disengage. I'm going to let you kind of do it yourself. Like that's very
Yeah.
hard to do. So the fact that he's understanding, and also, kind of he is helping you on your ERP journey as well, or has helped you on your ERP journey, like that's huge. Like that
Yeah.
is a great thing.
And I think maintaining a sense of humour about it as well. Like, it's a horrendous condition. Nobody with OCD needs telling that. We all know that. It is
Yeah.
severely debilitating.
Hmm.
However, one thing I have always done is be able to laugh at myself and to maintain that sense of humour. Like, when I had contamination OCD, and I'm sure that you will relate to this if you have contamination
Yeah.
OCD, my hands were like, couldn't touch anything ever.
Hmm.
Like, I didn't. So I used to walk around like this,
Yep.
and my husband used to be like, "Who are you boxing next?"
Yeah.
Because it just looked like I was going into the ring.
That's
Like
actually
this.
funny.
And we just kind of always maintained that sort of, and he'd mimic me. He'd walk past me and go, and
Yeah.
it was like, if somebody else would do that, I'd want to punch them, but it was funny when he did it, and it would kind of like make me think like, yeah, this is really ridiculous, but I
That is
couldn't help
incredible.
it. But I think maintaining that sense of humour and being able to sort of laugh at myself almost, even though it's not funny. It's
Yeah.
really, really not funny. I think that
It's
also
important.
helps. Yeah.
Yeah, I 1000% agree with that because that's also like it is a form of coping too, right? Is being able
Yeah.
to laugh at yourself and my way I would always tell myself, oh, because my OCD was really bad, I would always try to look at the positives, and I don't believe anything is ever just negative or just positive. I do believe in the law of duality, and for me, I would always be like, oh, but I'm so thoughtful and I'm so um like prompt and I'm more, organized and this and that. And I would go through a list of like all the good things about myself because of the way I am. But then I would look at the list of like how it like is hard for me to live my life sometimes. And I'd be like, is it really worth is it really worth being super thoughtful and all this stuff, but also like afraid to go out to eat? Like, is it really
Yes.
worth the trade-off? Um, so I think if people can kind of look at their situation and try to see that there is one, there's hope, because I mean your story is incredible, and two, the fact that there is a range of choices that we can make on how we respond to it. Through ERP, through trying to be comedic in some way for our own benefit. And that also kind of helps us kind of relate to each other too. Sometimes I watch Sean's lives, after he posts them, and I'm just like, this guy is hilarious. One, and two, I think about him sometimes when I'm going through my own shit, and I have to
Yeah.
be able to, like, if I have to do something that I'm really uncomfortable doing, I'm like, look at what Sean does every day. Look how
Yeah.
uncomfortable he is, and look at how he laughs about it and goes up there and does what he has to do, even though he's having a hard time. Like, if he can do that, you can do the same thing,
Yeah,
you
he
know?
is the perfect example of that because he is somebody that is knee deep in an exposure. His anxiety is at like 80%, and he still maintains a sense of humour. And I think that is exactly what I'm trying to explain. Like, all the way through ERP, me and my
Hmm.
therapist laughed. We found the funny because you have to. It's
Yeah.
like if you didn't laugh, you'd cry. It's one of those,
Yeah.
isn't it? Like, and very often I did cry too,
Of
but
course.
it,
Of
it is
course.
that situation where it's like we did, where there was a laugh to be had, we had it because,
Yeah.
and it wasn't laughing at me, it wasn't laughing, it was just laughing at the situation,
Yeah.
the kind of, yeah,
I know, because sometimes
it's,
you look at it and you're like, really? Like, this
yeah,
is this is what's stopping me right now? Really?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I know.
because really, when if you was to explain it to somebody else, they'd be like, "And like
Yeah.
so," but you're like, "No, but you don't understand the terror that I'm feeling right now. You don't
Yeah.
understand the horror that I'm going through." To somebody else, it does just sound like
You're like, wow.
you're like, "But no, the
Yeah.
the fork touched that table," and they're like,
Yeah.
"And you're like, no, this is the end of the world. You don't understand.
Yes. Yes. I do the
I'm
same.
gonna
I do the
die. All
same
my
thing.
family are gonna die."
Yeah. Yeah. I get it. And the people in, sometimes our lives, when they don't understand, they're just like, you'll be fine. Like, relax. And it's like, yes, but one, you're not supposed to say I'll be fine, because that kind of
Yeah,
keeps me in the cycle. But also too, I kind of want to know that I'll be okay. It's it's
yeah,
it's terrible, I know, but I mean your story is incredible, and I mean the fact that you're so open about it. I know that you're on Instagram, and
yeah.
you're doing the cold plunges too, which I really I want to do those too. Does that help you?
Yes.
Yeah.
I actually only tried that for the first time this year. That's something else that I wanted to touch upon actually, that I feel like has been a really helpful part of the journey, is doing work on my mindset.
Hmm.
Um, and I work with a mindset coach. Now, he is not a therapist at all. We do not discuss my mental health. We do not discuss my OCD. That is not what he's there for. But he is a mindset personal development coach. So what he does help me to do is like challenge limiting beliefs.
Yep.
that I hold. He helps me to push myself out of my comfort zone. Not in terms of OCD or exposures in that sense, but just in general in life.
Sure.
And the skills that I've been able to learn working with him, and I've worked with him for 5 years, have been massively transferable into ERP, and I think have strengthened me to go into ERP as well, because all of the work that I've done with him, like getting into cold plunges, which is not something anybody wants to do, and it's very uncomfortable and it's frightening. It's that same mindset when you are about to start an exposure. We've done so much work over 5 years, but all about sort of getting me to push outside of my comfort zone, do the things that I don't want to do. You mentioned earlier about like creating habits, and you were saying like how you
Yes.
start small with that, and it's the small daily habits that actually add up to the biggest changes overall, isn't it? It's like, you know, if you exercise for 20 minutes a day, one 20-minute
Mm-hmm.
workout doesn't make a difference, but a 20-minute workout 5 times a week soon does. And it's
Yes.
that sort of stuff that I've worked with him on, and that's obviously like I document my days every day now in reels and make a reel
Mm-hmm.
at the end of every day. And obviously you've seen that like I have these habits in place where I make sure that I eat right and I exercise and all of those sort of
Yeah.
things. But anyway,
Yeah. It's
one of the
incredible.
things that he is really yeah, and one of the things that he's really big on is cold water therapy. So I went to an event in January, which in England in January is very, very cold. And one of the things that they had at this event was cold water therapy. And they were like, you know, we're really encouraging you to get in. And I was like, are you crazy? It's January. It's literally freezing. I don't want to get in there. And
Sure.
then I thought about it and I was like, but isn't this how you get into all these messes with your mind? By listening to that doubt, by listening to that fear. So I was like, I'm going to do it. So I did it. And the feeling that I got after, because it's that feeling of like, it's exactly the same after you complete an exposure and you're like, I did it. I overcome.
Yes.
I prevailed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that. And then I was like, I'm going to get one of them and start doing it at home. And then I decided that I wasn't, and I've battered it about a bit, and in the end I bought one. So I've got one in my own back garden now, and
Wow.
I do it a few times a week. And I find that it really helps because it's like, it's that thing of constantly having to go, the last thing I want to do right now is get in there. I know that is going to be really uncomfortable. I know that that's going to trigger my anxiety, because every time before I get into it, I start having these thoughts of like, but that's really cold. What if I have a heart attack? What
Yep.
if I panic? What if I can't breathe? What if I get hypothermia? The what ifs are endless.
They are.
And it's
They
about
really are.
me overcoming myself and going,
Yeah.
I'm going to get in there. Now, obviously, I want to say surrounding cold water therapy, that's something that is very much an individual choice for me. I did check with healthcare professionals that it was safe for me to
Yes.
be doing that. I do not have any underlying health conditions other than
Good.
anxiety. Um, you know, it would not be suitable for everybody, and I want to make that really clear. It's something that you would have to check that was okay for you to do before you decided to do it. However,
Sure.
for me, it was fine for me to do it, and so I decided to start. And yes, and I feel like it's lifted my mood. It's yeah, it's that feeling that you get after you've done it. You're like, wow, I just did something that's really hard, and I did it,
Yeah. It's the
and I'm really proud of
dopamine. The
myself now.
dopamine.
Yeah, it's the win,
Wow.
isn't it? It's a win.
Yeah. Yeah. That's like that's that. I don't even know what they equate that to, like it's like getting the thing, it's getting the coffee that you really want to get, it's getting the good grade, it's the dopamine of chasing something, doing it, and then achieving.
Yeah,
I think is that feeling, and also like the exhilarating physical aspect of getting out of an ice cold bath too. you
absolutely.
know
And then before I get in, I do some breathing. I do breathing while
yep.
I'm in there. Um, yeah, it just, for me, I found it to be absolutely incredible. I really like it. I know Sean, has been
Yeah.
doing it longer than I have. Sean's really finding benefits from it and loves it. So I think it's definitely an avenue that is, for me, definitely going to
Yeah.
stick and is definitely going to be something that I'll keep doing.
I'm gonna have
But
to
yeah,
try that.
definitely that feeling when you first get in, it's sort of
Yeah.
like, it does take your breath away. It is a bit
Yeah, it
of a like,
shocks you. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, I can imagine. I can
But
imagine.
we're used to that, Tyler. Like,
Yeah.
we're pros at that feeling.
Isn't that the truth? That is so true. It's so true.
Yeah,
I mean, you're doing an incredible job too. And your Instagram page, Fear to Fabulous, like that's how we came across each other. And the what you're doing and documenting everything there, has social media been a help for you in your journey with OCD and ERP?
it definitely has. And while I was going through ERP, I was like sort of uploading to my story a lot. I wasn't really posting reels or anything like that. I was really unwell mentally, not in a good place at
Yeah.
all. Um, so I wasn't posting an awful lot, but I was trying to document as much as I could while I was going through ERP. So they're all on my stories.
Hmm.
And the difference in the person I am now to where I was, even just like in February, it's
Wow.
unbelievable. Like all of
I
those
believe
reels,
that.
honestly, watch them, Tyler. It's frightening. I was so sad. I was so scared, helpless, felt defeated. And now I feel like I feel like me again. I feel like 20-year-old me again, like
That's so
happy.
great.
And
That's so great.
yeah,
That's one of the biggest things that that's one of the big reasons I'm happy for having you on here is I remember there was one post that you put up. I think it might have been last week or the week before, where you were talking about being out with your friends. You had gone out for a night out, and like how that was so hard for you. Like, I mean, it's hard, but like it was way harder for you, previously before you had, done all this work. And like just that feeling, there's so many people who can relate to that, where how hard it is to just get out of the house and to do something that is so easy for just the average person, right?
yeah,
um and listening to your stories and kind of, seeing your growth. And I'm not on Instagram too much scrolling. I do it mainly for my music and to post on stories. So when I do get a minute and I'm just hanging out on the couch, I'll scroll through and see what everybody's up to. And you're very open and honest, on your page, and I think there's a lot that people could learn from you, and also connect with you too,
yeah,
on your Fear to Fabulous page. So I'm very, very, thankful for people like you who are out there who are showing like, hey, this is what it's like to struggle with OCD, and this is what I'm going through, and to really just wear your heart on your sleeve. Like I think that's what a lot of people need, especially in the OCD community.
definitely. It's so necessary because I actually, until I started this Instagram page, I didn't actually know anybody else with OCD. So I've gone through 18 years of not being able to
Oh.
connect with or relate to anybody. And especially when I was diagnosed, you're going back to like the early 2000s,
Hmm.
mental health wasn't talked about like it's talked about now. And there was a lot of stigma surrounding
1000%.
it. And, you know, I remember once going into work when I was very first started with OCD and I was extremely unwell. And one of the older women in the office saying to me, and I'll never forget this, what have you got to be stressed about? You're a young girl. What have you got to be stressed about?
It's
And
terrible.
I will never, ever forget that,
Of course,
ever. Because I
because the
thought,
outside doesn't equal the inside.
absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I still come up against that. We all do. We still come up against
Sure.
misunderstanding, but I think it's a
Sure.
lot less now than what it used to be. Um, and I think, you know, the best thing we can do, like you said, like I do through my page, is I document it, I talk about it openly, and I'm educating and I'm
Yes.
advocating for this disorder, which I think is super important. But I'm really pleased that it's changing and it's coming on. And like I said, I didn't know anybody else with OCD. And this last sort of 6 months or so since I've started the page, and I've met people like yourself and like Sean and so many other members of the OCD community that are on there with accounts that are posting about it. I think that has really aided my
Mm-hmm.
recovery as well, because
Mm-hmm.
like you said before, you know, you watch Sean doing his exposures and you can see and you can feel it because you know how that feels. You can feel what
Yes.
he's going through, and it's inspiring. And it also
It
makes you
is.
realize that, like, it's not just me that feels like this. It's not just me that gets terrified by things. And if he can push through it, I need to try and push through it too. And
Yes.
it really helped me when I was going through ERP to watch him and to see him keep going out. And day after day, he's so consistent, isn't he, with his exposures?
I know. I know.
And day after day, watching him and thinking, like, it kind of made me feel more accountable to the fact that I needed to be more consistent too if I wanted to get
Yes.
better. So I think I have a lot to thank him for, really. He's
Yeah.
pretty incredible.
He's great. He texted me the other day, and he was texting me about my new song, and I was like, I just thought about you. For anybody who's listening, by the way, this we're talking about our friend Sean, who he has the Instagram page ERP and me. I actually had him on the podcast a few episodes back, but I told him, I was like, I was just thinking about you. Like, I was in a real, even the other day, like I was in some really uncomfortable situation with some of my own, my own anxieties, and I was like, Sean does it, you can stick this out, like you can do it, and so like that's the part about social media that I love, is being able to meet people
Yeah,
like you and Sean, people who are honest about what it is to have OCD. 10-year-old me is just healing every time he has these conversations with other people who have it, because I felt like you did, like super alone, super like I'm a freak, like nobody knows. If I told anybody what was going on in my head, they would probably throw me inside a mental facility or mental hospital. And it's a very isolating feeling growing up, and even in your 20s, like it's no different, because you feel like, why am I like, why can't I just be like normal, right, just like everybody else? And um it's everybody struggles with something. This is the struggle that we have, and it's up to us to talk about it and share about it, so that other people don't feel as alone and can learn really through what we've experienced.
definitely. And I've definitely gone through periods where I've felt like I would rather have anything but this because it is so bad. It is so bad.
Yeah.
But then when you think about it and I look at it now on the other side of ERP, it is very treatable actually. And we
Yes.
can overcome and we can reclaim our lives. And I'm very careful with my language on my page, and I would
Mhm.
never say that like I have recovered from OCD because I don't even know if that's possible. And I'm, you know,
Yeah.
it's still it's still there. I'm just managing
Yeah.
it. But I'm good
Right.
with that. And I think that's another thing, is like accepting that, okay, well, maybe it is always going to be there, but as long as I can manage it like this, then I can live a pretty
Yeah.
happy life. Maybe it will always be there, but as long as I can manage the symptoms of it, which is essentially what it is. It's like having a cold and taking cold remedies, isn't it? It's like, as long as I can manage the symptoms of it and not suffer,
That's so true.
then it's
Yeah.
okay, and I can live with it and I can live a full and happy life with it. And I think that giving up that fight for me was like, I think I've spent so long wanting to rid myself of it, and finally just accepting that, well, maybe I can't rid myself of it, and maybe that's okay. Maybe it's okay to learn to manage it.
Right.
But you do come across people that say they have fully recovered from it, that have got rid of it. I mean, if that's the case, then
More
great.
power to
Like,
them.
but I'm not going to convince myself that like it definitely is possible or it definitely is not. I'm just going to be open. Where I am now, or
Yes.
better, is great. I'll take it.
Yes. 1000%. And I've accepted that I'll never not have it, because for as long as
Mm-hmm.
I can remember, my brain has worked this way, and it's a part of my life. But I feel like I'm at a place sort of like you, where it's manageable and I can live it's still there, it's my mind will always find ways to chit chat, but it's still at a point where, at least now in my life, where I can still live my life without uh, being, you know, so cooped up in my little cocoon 24/7, you know, and
Yeah,
to the point where it hinders my life um, greatly, if that makes sense.
yeah, definitely.
You
It's
know,
it's just one of those things, isn't it? That I think that's the good part about meeting other people with it, is seeing that, you know, that there are varying degrees of it, and I think it can go through episodes. That's what I would say from my experience over 18 years, is that
yeah,
I always remember, even in the worst times, it does get better.
yes,
It
yes,
it sometimes it feels like I'm stuck here forever and I'm never going to get better. And like, especially when I got so bad that I couldn't eat and things like that, like that was
mm-hmm.
really dark and really scary. But it did get better, and I did
Yeah,
overcome it. And so I think that's one thing to always remember, is that it will, even when it
I love
feels like
that.
it won't, it will.
I love that. I mean, this has been incredible, Helen. You know, thank you so much for just being yourself and just being honest with me here and having this conversation. I've honestly, like, there were points of this conversation where I forgot we were recording and doing a podcast. It was just two people talking about OCD and connecting about something that we both, you know, live with. Um, is there something that you would like to say or leave the audience or anybody who's listening? Is there anything you'd like to say to them?
Yeah, I would say a mindset that I sort of live by now, um, in recovery, is choose your hard. And what I mean by that is, when you were asking me before about like, how did you get your head into that place where it was like, right, I'm going to do ERP? The life, and I'm going to put it in inverted commas, I had 6 months ago was, I couldn't go out the door. I couldn't, I couldn't, I couldn't live. I had tapping compulsions
Yep.
where it had got to a point, because you know what OCD is like, you can never satisfy it, so it will manifest further and further. And
Mm-hmm.
to get out of the house, I had to tap with my hands and feet, literally everything in the house, to even be
Yep.
able to leave. And that was every time I had to leave. So I could not leave the house without doing it. And that would take 40 minutes to get out of the house every
Wow.
time I had to leave the house. So that just makes you not want to leave the house, because it's like, it's too much
Sure.
hassle, it's too distressing. And obviously with
Mm-hmm.
any physical compulsions like that, you do them and then OCD goes, that wasn't right, do it again.
Right.
So I'd stand there tapping on a tile in the kitchen 100 times and it still wasn't
Yeah.
happy. And it was like, And so what I would say is, when I say choose your hard, that's what I mean. That
Yeah.
is hard. Living like that with those compulsions is harder than going through ERP and getting better.
1000%.
Personal lived experience,
1000%.
I swear. That
Choose
day-to-day
your hard.
existence of living in compulsions was so hard. The ERP was so much easier than that.
Wow.
So much
I
easier
think
than that.
that is one, an incredible story, but two, you're so right. And there's so much, the fear that that people have, I know myself included, you know, when it comes to ERP, um, when they really look at it and look at, well, how hard is my life now with what I deal with? You know,
Definitely
that's
harder than anything you're going to go through in ERP.
yeah. I mean,
Definitely.
that is so true. And I mean, this has been great, Helen. Thank you so much for sharing your time. And I know you're like 5 hours ahead of me right now, so you're probably getting ready for bed. But I really thank you so much for
Oh,
making the
no, it's
time
fine.
and coming on here and chatting.
I'm really grateful to you for having me, and also, like, thank you for doing what you do and having this platform and the podcast, and you know, obviously opening up conversation around this subject, because we really need that. We really do. And I'm
Absolutely.
so grateful to you
Absolutely.
for putting yourself out there, for giving up your own time, and know that running a podcast, organising guests. It's a lot of work. And the fact that
It
you're
is.
committing yourself to that and you're doing that, you deserve recognition. And also your
Oh,
new
thank you.
song, Tyler, it's
Thank you.
unbelievable. We can't go without talking
Thank
about
you.
that, because
Thank
that song
you so much. Thank you.
that song, literally anybody with anxiety, OCD, panic disorder, I'm probably sure
Yeah.
people with depression as well, will listen to
Yes.
that song and it will speak to them on a deep level.
Thank
It's
you.
fantastic.
Thank you
It
so
really
much. I
is.
really appreciate that. It's the closest that I could find in writing about what we struggle with, right? With our thinking. So it's I hope that people like yourself, people who listen to it who have the obsessive thinking and ADHD, like all of it, OCD. I hope that they feel understood, because like that was my way of trying to understand myself a bit.
Yeah,
So I really appreciate you very much for saying that. So this has been great. We're going to have you back on here again at some point to talk more later on
definitely.
about other things. There's so much we could talk about. But once again, Helen, FearToFabulous, go follow the page and see the incredible work that she is doing. So Helen, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Tyler.